America has always been a place of courage, from the immigrants who crossed the seas to take a chance on America, many knowing that they would never see their homes again, to the pioneers who crossed the trackless continent. That saga has its scars, but without their courage, we would not be in America, from sea to shining sea.
That was House Speaker Nancy Pelosi after she received the John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Award. The Speaker received the honor for her fight to expand access to health care for all Americans. The successful fight that culminated with the signing of the Affordable Care Act cost her the speakership, but ensured access to health care for 40 million more Americans. We'll listen to Ambassador Caroline Kennedy's speech that night and speak with Profile and Courage Award committee member Senator Chris Dodd on why Speaker Pelosi was chosen for the honor on this week's episode of JFK 35.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Well, welcome to this week's episode of JFK 35, a podcast by the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation. I'm Matt Porter. Last month, Ambassador Caroline Kennedy and her son Jack Schlossberg honored United States House Speaker Nancy Pelosi with the 2019 John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Award. Each year, the JFK Library Foundation recognizes and celebrates the quality of political courage President Kennedy admired most. The award recognizes a public official or officials at the federal, state, or local level whose actions demonstrate the qualities of a politically courageous leadership in the spirit of Profiles in Courage, President Kennedy's 1957 Pulitzer Prize-winning book, which recounts the stories of 8 U.S. senators who risked their careers by embracing unpopular positions for the greater good. The Speaker received the award for her fight to pass health care reform, but also for her recent efforts to retake the House majority by helping to elect the most diverse Congress in our nation's history. Ambassador Caroline Kennedy addressed the audience at the May 19th ceremony.
That's what's so inspiring about tonight and what makes Speaker Pelosi the most consequential woman in American political history. I saw her inspire a nation of Japanese women when she visited, just as she has inspired generations of Americans, men and women. No one advocated as strongly for American workers, for human rights, for peace and security, or for California rice as she did when she came to Tokyo. She has consistently acted in service of our highest principles and our most vulnerable citizens. She has suffered defeats, but she has never given up. Thanks to her courage, we have health care for all Americans, the most diverse Democratic Congress in American history, and the strength to stand firm against the administration's assault on the rule of law.
Joining me now is former Senator Chris Dodd of Connecticut. Senator Dodd served in the House with Speaker Pelosi and also serves on the Profile and Courage Award Committee, which helped choose the winner this year. Senator Dodd, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Senator Dodd, Speaker Nancy Pelosi is getting the JFK Profile and Courage Award. You've known her a little bit. Tell me about how far that relationship goes back.
Well, it goes back a long time. My sister, who passed away a number of years ago, and Nancy were great pals, great friends all through college. And I first met Nancy when she stayed at our house on numerous occasions, when I guess Nancy would have been about 18 or 19 years old. So I've known her a long, long time. She's been a great personal friend, not just to my sister and my family, but to me as well in Congress, going back to her days long before she was elected to Congress, when she was the chairperson of the Northern California Democrats, and later of the whole state Democrats, and a great supporter of Democratic candidates at both the national and state level. So I've known her a long time, since she was a terrific young woman and in college with my sister, and through these wonderful years that she's been such a remarkable leader in Congress.
The Profile and Courage Award is all about someone who's done something not because it was politically expedient, but because it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
You've known Speaker Pelosi, a lot of her life. What about her character do you think makes her a perfect fit for the Profile and Courage Award?
Well, she incorporates, we talk about profiles in courage, and obviously President Kennedy wrote the book identifying individuals who did what was contrary to their own political interests and showed great courage in doing so. Implicit in the award is also values. We don't give an award for profiles in values, but in a sense, when we talk about profiles in courage, it's not just courage, but also values you're supporting. And there have been numerous occasions when Nancy Pelosi has demonstrated that commitment. Instead of going back years, let me just talk about recent events. I was the co-author of the Dodd-Frank legislation, and one of the difficult votes was on something called TARP legislation, putting billions of dollars in the hands of banks, many of whom had caused the problem that we were in the financial crisis back in 2008. Here was a democratically controlled Congress, a Republican administration who had created this mess. We're down 40 days before a national election. It would have been easy for Democrats to vote against the TARP legislation, add to the chaos that was in the country, and take advantage of it politically. Nancy Pelosi spoke to her Democratic caucus, I'll never forget this, in which she said, let's remember why we were elected, to do the job that people sent us here to do. And so I'm expecting everyone to support this legislation. It's the right thing to do. And I don't want to hear you say you can't vote for it for political reasons. That's not why we were sent here, period. That was almost a direct quote. And the Democrats helped carry that day on that vote to help out a Republican administration that had created the mess that put us into in the fall of 2008. That's the kind of leader Nancy Pelosi has been. And that was true with health care. There were people, frankly, in the Obama administration, not the president, but people who didn't like the ACA, the Affordable Care Act. They thought it was too much. Let's do something else. Nancy Pelosi met at the White House, and she reported back to a Democratic caucus. And the White House said, why don't some of the people, let's pare this back, just a smaller bill. And she used her hands, which she's now famous for doing so. And that famous childhood poem of Itsy Bitsy Spider went up the water spout.
Yeah.
And she took her hands, I'm told, and did that in the White House saying, I'm not for any itsy bitsy teeny weeny health care bill. We want a broad bill. She went back to her caucus and shared that story with the members. They stood up and gave her a long standing ovation and applause for the fact that she stood for the principle of understanding the moment we were in and the opportunity we could have to do something for millions of people in this country who deserve to have good, affordable health care. Those are examples of the kind of leadership she's provided.
That was a tough vote. A lot of representatives lost their seats. She lost the speakership.
Yep.
Yeah. How difficult and how much does that make that she was able to get people around to vote against essentially their political interests or their political survivability?
Well, because she doesn't lead with fear and bullying or threats. I know when people say, well, she's a great vote counter. Well, that's true, but it's not like some secret formula. Except to this, it's not a secret. First of all, she knows her membership. She knows them very well. She knows their families. She knows their districts. She knows what they care about. She knows what they believe in. And so when she talks to them, she first of all listens and doesn't sit there and threaten a dam project or a highway bill or something. She talks about the value and the importance of issues. She brings people up. She raises them up to understand the moment that they're in. Doesn't do it on every bill that comes along. When she understands a large issue in a critical moment, she also understands that the window to pass major bills stays open only for a short time. You could never have passed the Affordable Care Act 2 years before we did, and could have never passed it 2 years afterwards. It was only in that window which she understood the importance of it. And she reminded members who cared about doing the right thing and contributing to history that while this was a dangerous vote politically, there's no doubt about that, they were going to be involved in something that people would remember for years and years and years to come. And that elevates members, reminds them of why they're there. Going back to that story I told about the TARP legislation and financial reform. That's her style of leadership. She knows her membership, she knows their districts, and she listens to people. That's the critical value and the formula, if you will, by why she counts so well.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that, there are a lot of talk about there's not a lot of profiles in courage these days in Congress, that those leaders are fewer and hard to find, someone like Speaker Pelosi?
I think it is, and it's regrettably so. It's sad to see that. I hate to acknowledge that because the 36 years I spent in the Congress, 30 of them in the Senate, 6 in the House of Representatives, I served with remarkable leaders. We're gathering tonight in the JFK Library. And again, the very book he wrote. The people I served with, both Democrats and Republicans, never would have had the Civil Rights Bill if not for Everett Dirksen, for instance, a Republican leader of the Senate. Obviously, Hubert Humphrey, Jack Kennedy, obviously, Ted Kennedy, over and over again. did what was the right thing to do, even though the politics weren't great. Standing up to really support integration among school children here in Massachusetts was hugely unpopular at a moment. Never deviated away from the point that we ought to make sure that education, good education, is available to every child. There's a history of that. Today we're walking away from that, unfortunately. I think we have to get it back because I think an awful lot of Americans care about it. I think they want leadership in the country that inspires and excites them to do the good and the right thing. We all like to be a part of that. So I'm optimistic about the future, that we'll see that turn. We've gone through a bad spot here, but I think we'll come out of it. And Nancy Pelosi is going to help do that.
Yeah, and the JFK Library just revamped its legacy gallery, which is putting Profiles in Courage on the center stage. Tonight we have Speaker Pelosi who will give an address. What do you hope that, in the next 2 critical years, as another election is going and presidential candidates are starting to, make their positions made, what do you hope inspiration we can draw from tonight that can maybe go beyond tonight?
Well, I think it's so important the library does this and has now for more than 30 years. And that is recognize people at every level of government, at the local level, state level, national level, primarily elected officials in the United States, although there have been times when the library has recognized foreign leaders as well, but mostly from the United States. And it's a story that needs to be told. And I think we're doing a lot better in telling the story and getting the story out. We need to be inspired again, and inspired not by partisanship, but be inspired by people who stand up and do the right thing. The young man today who won the award as the best essay, it was well written, but he chose a great subject matter. He chose a Republican member of Congress, a woman, who had served longer than anyone until recently as a woman, who stood up for German immigration at a time when that was not terribly popular at the time, sort of like what we've seen with Syrians and others coming to the country. We need to tell the story about people who've done that, as the library has done with this award over the years. And so the more stories we tell, young people hear about them, I would think it would inspire them. I was inspired by Jack Kennedy. I was a 28, 29 year old. I joined the Peace Corps in Latin America because Jack Kennedy said it's a great thing to do. You'll serve your country and you'll have a great experience and come back as a better person for it. And I ran for Congress in many ways, sort of articulating the views that I thought President Kennedy would want to be championing had he not been removed from the public life by the tragic assassination. So again, we need those models. Every generation does. And we've had darn few of them in the last few years. But again, I'm the eternal optimist, and I believe we'll find people once again. I think a good crop of candidates are running for president this time. I don't agree with all of them, but I think all of them care deeply about the country, want to do the right thing, want to lead a nation back and put us back on our feet again going forward.
One last question. You serve on the Profile and Courage Committee, so you get the chance to look at some of the stories of political courage that are evaluated for this award. What would you tell the people who aren't obviously on that committee but want to look for, I think sometimes the people who are not courageous or like the bad examples that get the most headlines, what should people do when they're trying to look for courage in the political system today?
Well, and we all know it when we see it. I guess it's hard to define in some ways, but we all are examples of it. We read about these children recently in Colorado who lost their lives because they stood up to that gunman, made that decision in a flash to do the right thing. We can tell stories every day. Pick up the local newspaper, and you'll read about courage of a school teacher, a policeman, a citizen, people who just do things because it's the right thing to do. And so we need more of those stories. I think it's important to celebrate that. And so when people are looking around their own neighborhoods, that's why we've recognized people in the past that no one's ever heard of nationally.
Most of the time, people are not heard of because they've done something for the right, not for the publicity.
Not for the publicity, and they've been at a local level, a mayor, a member of a city council. A year ago, we recognized a young man who wrote the story about one vote in the Tennessee legislature on women's suffrage and the right to vote. One person that's been forgotten by history. It was years and years ago, almost a century ago, when that young man stood up in the Tennessee legislature and voted for women to have the right to vote. Again, a lost story, but a great story to be told today in many ways about it. So I think it's fun, and if people are listening to this, send us examples of some local elected official, Democrat or Republican, Independent, who stood up and done the right thing with the right values, that for the right reasons as well. We need more of those stories. And I'll tell you, this library, the JFK Library, would welcome to have more suggestions from people. And while they may not, every one of them, not all of them can win, we collect those stories. And we can find ways to transmit those stories back out to the public.
Well, great. And, I like the fact that you're an eternal optimist. So you would be of the crowd saying, well, people say there aren't that many courageous people out there. You believe there are a lot more out there than
I
we
think they are. You give people the chance to do the right thing. More people than not will jump at the opportunity. Not because someone's lectured them to do so. It's our human nature to do the right thing, to reach out and help someone at a critical moment. That's kind of who we are as human beings. And we've really celebrated that in our country historically. People have done brave things at a local, state, or national level throughout history. And so we know the value of it, what a difference it makes. It also sets an example for young people coming along, that you'll never be prouder of yourself or a family member than one who stands up to do the right thing, even as it may be terribly unpopular, even though it may be politically damaging. By doing the right thing, you'll never, ever regret that.
Well, thank you, Senator Dodd. Appreciate your time.
Not at all. Thank you.
Well, thank you for listening to our latest podcast as we look at our most recent Profile in Courage honoree, Speaker Nancy Pelosi. This episode marks the end of our second season, but we will have some bonus episodes coming this summer, including interviews with astronauts and space scientists as we approach the Apollo 11 50th anniversary on July 20th. If you have questions or story ideas, email us at jfk35pod@jfklfoundation.org or just tweet at us at JFK Library using the hashtag JFK35. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at JFK Library. And if you liked what you heard today, please consider subscribing to our podcast or leaving us a review. Thank you for listening. Have a great week.